This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers, where we interview indie creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter.
And I'm Ryan Gerasi. And this week,
The Tattered Heart. Mitzi watched the firefighters dismember the iron fence. A fleet of emergency vehicles, police cars, ambulances, coroner's vans, screamed up Lago Vista Terrace and poured through the gap, churning across the manicured lawn and plowing through rows of fake headstones. A cluster of sleepy jack-o'-lanterns waited on the white marble steps to greet them. A wave of stabbing red and blue light scoured the smiles from their faces. A pen light traced back and forth across her eyes, snapping Mitzi's focus back to the paramedic. The antiseptic glare inside the ambulance revealed the blood on her Halloween costume. Her white blouse was splattered, and her blue gingham dress was soaked. Her porcelain pale skin, however, was unbroken. The blood was not hers. The paramedic peeled off his gloves. A policewoman took his place, wrapping a blanket around the petite teenage girl. "Your name is Mitzi, correct?" The girl nodded. "Can you tell me what you saw tonight?" Mitzi opened her fist to reveal a battered sunflower. She caressed its golden petals. A tear slipped down her cheek. The officer flipped open a notepad. "I know it's still raw, but we urgently need information. Anything you can remember, please." The last gasp of October whispered through the trees. Shivering, Mitzi pulled the blanket tighter. "I snuck into the party." Mitzi tiptoed across the marble entryway of Haley Maxwell's mansion, clinging as closely to the wall as the pyramids of pumpkins and flickering candelabras would allow. The echoes of the party were deafening. It sounded as though the entire senior class was there. Mitzi, as usual, had not received an invitation. If no one asked her to homecoming or prom, which was always a safe bet, this would be Mitzi's last chance to be with her classmates before graduation. Haley's Halloween Ball was the can't-miss event of the social calendar, the first party of the school year for brown-nosers to suck up to the popular kids. The Halloween Ball was usually held at the Maxwell's Country Club, but this was senior year. Haley and her friends wanted to get wasted without adult supervision. She graciously allowed her parents to stock the fridge and pay for all the decorations before dismissing them for the evening. Mitzi was dressed like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, but her costume was in fact a disguise. She had twisted her unfashionable frizzy brown hair into neat pigtails. She had traded her shabby, baggy Mickey Mouse sweatshirt for a blue gingham dress, and just to be safe, she had hidden her jittery eyes behind a pair of bulky green glasses. She crept further into the house. No one gave her a second look, but Mitzi was used to that. She tried to relax. A chorus of high-pitched cackles cleaved through the air. Mitzi clenched up at the sound of Haley and her entourage. They had aimed their mocking laughter at her since grade school. They traipsed by in their cheerleader outfits. Haley's boyfriend of the month followed at her heels like an empty-headed puppy in a varsity jacket. Mitzi dumped an abandoned cup into a houseplant and carried it in front of her to bolster her disguise. She wasn't afraid of being ejected from the party. She was afraid of whatever twisted humiliation Haley might devise without any teachers present to stop her. "All hookers must die!" A gawky teenage boy jumped onto a white sofa by the sunken living room area. He whirled his plastic scimitar over the dancing crowd and bellowed, "Death to the drunkards and fornicators! Judgment upon the wicked and unclean!" A few people booed, a few people laughed. Mitzi shuddered. The boy wore a camo jacket and a pillowcase over his head, because no Halloween party or haunted house in their town was complete without some metalhead or burnout showing up dressed like the tatterdemalion. Mitzi blurted, "It's all wrong!" Her meek voice pushed against the wall of noise, but met no resistance. In the unexpected lull between songs, her words flew unimpeded. The knockoff slasher pointed his sword at her. "Says who?" "He used a pitchfork," Mitzi said. Duh, but they only sell the stupid Red Devil kind. And his jacket was just green, not camouflage. And his hood was made of burlap. He pulled off his pillowcase and squinted. Wait, is that messy? All eyes turned towards Mitzi. Someone turned off the music. She looked around in a panic to see if Haley had noticed, but her squad had strutted out through the kitchen into the backyard. The boy pulled a flask from his jacket and grinned. It's Messy's first party, everybody! Let's get her fucked up! He poured a heavy splash of booze into her cup. The crowd pressed in around her. Mitzi politely declined and handed off her drink. Someone pushed it back into her face. The fumes made her eyes water. A chant began to circulate through the tightening knot of teens. Messi, Messi, Messi. A shiny metallic glove snatched the cup away. Mitzi shrank back as someone in a homemade robot costume pushed into the circle. They lifted the cup and chugged it down in one go. The crowd roared their approval. The music blared back to life. Sorry, the robot wheezed from his burning throat. Looked like you were in trouble. Mitzi gasped. It was Josh Levin. She hadn't stood this close to him since they'd been paired up for a 3-legged race in the 6th grade. She blushed. No thank. Do thank. You, obviously. Josh swept the curtain of wavy dark hair from his face. Mitzi? She gave him a timid wave. Hi, Josh. He leaned towards the sofa and stumbled. Mitzi grabbed his flexible dryer hose arm to hold him steady. He looked at the cup and grimaced. Jesus, what the hell was in this? Mitzi guided him through the jostling crowd and up the steps of the sunken living room. A blue haze of cigarettes and weed wafted up from the furnished basement. It looked like a peaceful place to lay low, but Josh's rubbery legs were not going to make it down those stairs. She popped a random door open and found a teenager in a clown costume grinding with a Mr. Potato Head against a washing machine. The next door led to a marble bathroom with a sink full of vomit and an unconscious Frankenstein face down on a green-stained toilet. They roamed through the dark halls until they found a room far enough from the party that it wasn't draped with fake webs and spiders. Mitzi nudged the heavy office door shut with her elbow and deposited Josh on an Italian leather sofa. You need water. She filled 2 crystal glasses at the wet bar sink. Josh cradled his head. Tomorrow's gonna suck. Mitzi perched on the edge of a sofa cushion. From a hangover? Josh gave her a crooked grin. Never had one? Back in the 6th grade, Josh had a cute round baby face. Now he had a very nice jawline. Mitzi swung her feet and studied the bookshelves. He tapped her on the knee. Hey, how come you know so much about tatterdemalion? Mitzi tucked in the sides of her blue gingham dress. I was terrified of the tatterdemalion as a kid. Josh snorted. Well, duh. He freaked out every kid in town. Mitzi dropped her chin. I know, but it was a serious problem for me. Like, constant nightmares. I wouldn't even go out in my own backyard. That's probably why I don't have any friends. I never made any as a child. One day, I was fed up with being scared, so I asked my mother to take me to the library. My therapist told me that fear was the result of a restless imagination, so I filled my head with facts. I learned everything there was to know about the tatterdemalion. Wow, that's pretty smart, Josh said. So, what did you find out? Little things. Details, she said. Newspaper reports, old eyewitness accounts. There wasn't a ton, but it helped put some of the crazier stories to rest. I heard he was a gorked out kid, like an inbred hillbilly. Mitzi cracked up. Well, I heard he was a scarecrow that got struck by lightning. My favorite, though, is the one where he's the heartbroken ghost of a star-crossed farmer. Well, aren't you romantic? He set his glass on a lacquered walnut table and turned towards her with both hands free. Mitzi scooted a coaster under the glass and then scooted herself to the opposite end of the sofa. My theory, she said, is that he was a Vietnam vet. The dates line up. Plus, he's got the jacket. Think his flesh was melted by napalm? Josh rubbed his hand over his face. Under that burlap sack? Maybe, Mitzi said. It could be a copycat thing. Or, an homage. Josh gave her a playful push. Oh, please. They don't even tell the old Chapel of Blood tale to Boy Scouts anymore. She pushed him back. Read your history, Mr. Levin. It really happened. Same know-it-all Mitzi. She gasped. What's that supposed to mean? You always had to have the last word at... God, what was that nerdy after-school club we were in? Odyssey of the Mind. Yes, creativity and problem solving, he sighed. That was so lame. Yeah, Mitzi rolled her eyes. Like, totally lame. He reached out to grab her face. She flinched. Josh? He removed her big green glasses. Sorry, you're Dorothy, right? What's with these? They had to wear them in the Emerald City. Josh looked confused. In the book? Oh. He put them down and gave her another crooked smile. When did we stop hanging out? Probably, Mitzi mumbled, when you started dating Haley? Oh, wow, right. 7th grade. And then she cheated on me. Man, she could be such a bitch. He looked into Mitzi's eyes. She doesn't know, does she? Mitzi swallowed. What doesn't Haley know? That nobody cares about the prom queen after graduation? The real world is going to be a rude awakening for her. But you? He slid his arm across the supple leather. High school only made you stronger. Josh bent down and kissed her neck. His wavy hair tickled her chest. His wet lips sent tingles down her spine. Mitzi pushed him back and huffed. I can't. I want to. With you. But... He traced a circle around the smooth bare skin of her shoulder, raising goosebumps with the heat from his fingertips. But what? You're saving yourself? Mitzi crossed her arms tight against her chest. Yes. For who? Jesus? Josh took her delicate hands in his. You're not like Haley. You don't have to drink or smoke to be cool, but high school is almost over. And you've never hooked up with anybody. Being a good girl is going to ruin your college experience. The thump of bass against the office door died. Somebody was shouting. Mitzi moved to the door and listened. Something's going on. She stepped out into the dark hall. Josh tested his legs and followed. Mitzi, wait! Come back! One of the varsity basketball players was addressing the crowd gathered in the sunken living room. This way for the costume contest! Ladies, line up! Catcalls and wolf whistles filled the sweaty air. Mitzi and Josh hung back along the edge. The knockoff tatterdemalion climbed onto the kitchen island and bellowed, Happy Halloween, heathens! I'm here to chop your heads off! Haley slapped him with a spatula. Ew! Get off! The metalhead parried with his plastic sword and said, Just give me my prize, man! Haley's boyfriend lunged for him. The crowd murmured, shifting their attention to the scene in the backyard beyond the sliding glass doors. 2 teenagers, a skinny boy dressed like Zorro with a sad attempt at a mustache, and a girl in a wilted witch hat and steamed-up glasses were swaying together and swapping spit with sloppy abandon. Gasps bubbled through the crowd. Mitzi's eyes followed and adjusted. The undulating light of the backyard pool teased her with glimpses of something emerging from the thick wall of hedges. It was a man. A very large man. A very large man in a mask. He approached the young lovers. With each step, the rippling bands of light revealed more of his color and texture. The filthy green of his beat-up old jacket. The rough burlap sack on his face. Inside the kitchen, the metalhead whined. Whatever, I was here first, man. Mitzi dug her fingers into Josh's arm. Nervous giggles rolled through the students, along with whispers of a name. Tatterdemalion. Everyone watched the oblivious teens outside continue to suck face. The hulking figure reached into his shoddy army field jacket. The murmuring partygoers held their breath. Even Haley watched, entranced, eager to see this mysterious latecomer scare the clueless couple into the pool. The man in the tatterdemalion costume raised his meaty right fist. 4 wicked spikes protruded from between his fingers. He was holding the head of a rusty pitchfork. The ragged black eye holes in his sack aimed straight ahead. He was staring past the young lovers, through the large sliding glass doors, into the kitchen, at Haley. He slammed the pitchfork through the back of the skinny boy's head. The tines of the pitchfork pinned both their skulls together. The twitching bodies sloughed into the pool, spreading a blood slick through the water that drenched the backyard in crimson light. The crowd stood frozen, a herd of deer spellbound by the glare of oncoming headlights. Mitzi's mouth opened, straining to emit a strangled cry. The tatterdemalion raised his fist again and whipped it forward. The glass doors shattered, scattering the students at last in a blast of shrieking panic. Haley's boyfriend howled and clutched the pitchfork, nailing the meat of his inner thigh to the kitchen island. Josh seized Mitzi's hand and bolted, struggling to keep her upright as waves of bodies crashed together around them. A girl in a Marilyn Monroe dress tripped face first into the stereo, adding a cacophony of wailing guitars to the staccato beat of colliding skulls, snapping fingers, buckling ankles, and twisting wrists. People slipped in pools of vomit, old and new, costumes snagged and tangled, knees and rib cages smashed through sturdy furniture. The mob stampeded into the marble entryway, tripping over candelabras and stumbling over pumpkins. Fistfights broke out as jocks shoved their way through and girls pulled each other's hair. The shorter kids were trampled into the pulpy carpet of pumpkin guts, blood, and teeth. This human logjam proved fatal, even to those alpha males who were successfully brawling to stay on top. For the tatterdemalion was now among them. He carved through their toned young flesh, unleashing gouts of blood that slapped against the pristine walls and painted over family portraits. He ripped off their jaws and cast their steaming loops of intestines against the unopened front door. Gibbering party-goers peeled off in all directions, dashing upstairs or scrambling for the uncertain safety of the dark basement. Mitzi dug in her heels. "No!" she screamed in Josh's ear. "Those are dead ends!" She led him back to the secluded office and slammed the heavy door. Josh fumbled with the lamp in the corner, desperate to turn it off. "Lights! Get the lights!" He smashed it against the wall in frustration. They shrank back from the door, meeting back on the sofa. They huddled in the dark. Something slammed into the door. Mitzi covered her mouth. "Hey!" The pounding continued. "Let me in!" It was Haley. "This is my goddamn house! Let me in!" The pounding grew frantic, swelling across the length of the door. She was punching and kicking the door, throwing her entire body against it. "Help me!" Josh turned towards Mitzi. His throat bobbed. She shook her head. Haley's screams grew wild, and the barrage against the door intensified. The thick door began to bow inward with each maniacal impact. 4 long spikes gouged through the top of the solid oak door. A tangle of bloody blonde hair dribbled brains onto the office floor. The Maxwell house cowered in stunned silence. The door creaked open through the splintered wooden frame. Haley's body dangled, pinned to the outside by a pitchfork. The tatterdemalion filled the doorway. His body glistened in the dark with gore. A bloody handprint streaked the burlap sack over his face, giving the impression of a skeletal grin beneath his hollow black eyes. Josh reluctantly placed himself between the murderer and Mitzi. His hands were quaking, but he clenched them into clammy fists. Mitzi wrapped her pale arms tight around his waist. The tatterdemalion reached into his jacket once more. Josh swallowed hard. "Mitzi, get ready to run." The tatterdemalion held out his gloved hand. In it was a golden sunflower. Mitzi whispered into Josh's ear, "I was saving myself for him." She shoved him forward. The tatterdemalion hoisted Josh by the scruff of his neck and slammed him onto the spikes jutting through the door. Josh hung on one side, Haley on the other. Mitzi plucked the flower from the tatterdemalian's hand and blushed. The first wail of police sirens drifted up Laguna Vista Terrace. "Go." She gently touched tatterdemalian's blood-drenched chest. "I will find you again." Mitzi gazed up at the policewoman. "Then the killer heard sirens and ran off. If Josh hadn't sacrificed himself to save me..." She buried her face in the blanket and wept. The policewoman's pen hovered over her notepad, interrupted by a piercing scream. Haley's parents were thrashing against the cordon of police officers blocking their own front lawn. Mrs. Maxwell beat her fists against an officer's chest and wailed. The policewoman flipped her notepad shut, paused, and gave Mitzi a sad smile. "I'm just glad that you're safe. You're a good kid." She hurried off to deal with Haley's grieving parents. Mitzi spun the flower in her dainty, spotless hand. I am a good girl, she said with a smile. I'm the last one left.
So, do you think she summoned the Tatterdemalion to, like, get revenge for the kids being
The secret
mean to her?
backstory is that she went out and found the Tatterdemalion because she did all that research, and she befriended him and lured him to the party, knowing that she'd be the only girl there, not drinking, smoking, and screwing.
Oh, right.
You know, she was tempted by Josh, but she had to save herself to remain
Right.
pure.
I wonder if it's enough not to drink or smoke if your intentions are to murder everyone at a party. Do you still count as pure? I guess physically, yes, you do. By the rules of the slasher film. Is that a real character from myth,
I made
or
it
did
up.
you make it up?
I wanted to play with a scarecrow imagery.
Well, I liked all the little sort of in-jokes and nods you gave to other things, including stuff that we've made up on
gotta
our
keep it
show
fun,
and
boys.
whatnot.
Well, Halloween Ball is a big one based on some of the cheesy movies we watch. And then Gorked Out Kid was a reference to Hell Night.
You did a great job of creating these sort of fear red herrings where the kid was dressed up like the Tatterdemalion, and I kind of thought he was going to end up being like a school shooter type of person who was actually, because you set it up in the beginning that all these kids were dead. So the whole time I was going, okay, well, what is the cause? What's going to happen? So I was like, oh, maybe it's this kid and he's going to like shoot up the place or stab up the place. And then, Josh had the weird drink, and so I thought, oh, okay, somebody's poisoning everybody. Peppered in there were some good misdirects.
I was trying to construct it like a puzzle where I needed all the clues in there. I wanted to play fair, and I wanted to get different theories out there on who or what the Tatterdemalion was. Is he a ghost? Is he a monster? Is he a serial killer? Is he a copycat killer? Like, is he from a long, long time ago, or is he somebody more recent? It's all very vague, but it clearly left an impact on this town, and all the kids were scared of them like a boogeyman. One of the reasons I could give Mitzi cover for the fact that she knew so much about the Tatterdemalion and what he was really like was because she'd done all this research, because she used to
Because
be
she was scared.
traumatized. Yeah.
I think you could maybe push some of those moments to increase the fear factor slightly throughout the sort of beginning of the story.
I'll be honest, it didn't even occur to me to try to set up the story at the party as menacing or creating an air of dread, because I was so focused on creating an unreliable narrator, because everything that happens in this flashback is her version of events
Right.
to the police officer, where she sets up what went on with the twist at the end that she's lying to the police, that she's the one who brought the Tatterdemalion there.
Well, there's an automatic sense of tension that you create when you start with a murder scene and then flash back. You can't help it. Like, even if you didn't mean to, technically, it's like a perfect setup for that kind of...
Right. I kind of wanted to set up the layout of the party and the necessary characters for the big explosion of violence. One challenge I ran into was that, I picked Dorothy as her costume because I just wanted to do something that kind of linked her thematically to a scarecrow.
Oh,
And Josh, the cute boy, was in
a Tin Man suit.
But I also wanted her in disguise because she was sneaking into this party. And so I didn't know about the green glasses. But friend of the show, Ed Erdelak, was like, oh yeah, in the books, they all have to wear these green glasses when they go to the Emerald City. Because it turns out it's not really an Emerald City. It's just a normal place. And I was like, oh, cool, because Mitzi is so jealous of everyone. She's looking at all through green glasses.
Huh.
And the word Mitzi in German actually means bitter.
Is she jealous of everyone, or is she just angry at everyone?
She's angry and jealous at the high school experience they're having. I mean, she's never had any friends, and she's been sort of mocked and tormented. But as much as I put that in there, I was afraid of tipping it that, like, she was vengeful.
Right.
And even the title, The Tattered Heart, I'm worried that, you know, the title might give away the game too soon.
Right.
You know, she is the only survivor. Another thing that was really hard for me to figure out was that in a typical slasher movie, the kills are happening off-screen from the main characters. The slasher is stalking on the periphery. You know, someone goes outside to take a leak and they get killed. Or two people are making out in a closet and they get killed. And all the bodies are sort of stacking up around the main character.
Without them even knowing it.
Until there's the big confrontation. But in this story, it all had to happen from Mitzi's point of view.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I couldn't get too far inside her head. Like, I could only go so many levels deep about what she was thinking or feeling. In fact, there's one line in there I got to cut where she sees the popular girls in their cheerleader outfits, and it says, "How original." And that's a bit of sort of a narrative voice that probably wouldn't make it through all the filters as she's telling the story to the police officer.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of my other thoughts was that you should show them being mean to her at the party so that it's justified, or so that we actually see it rather than just having her tell it. But when you said earlier that, oh yeah, right, she's telling the story to the police, so even if something like that did happen at the party, she would just leave that part out. But what you also could do is you can do some of her internal narrative, but it doesn't have to be, you know, she can be saying whatever she wants to the police, so you can have her thoughts be whatever you want them to be in order to either throw the reader off the scent or...
I don't want to violate the unreliable narrator. So the conceit, it starts with Mitzi watched. Those are like the first two words. And it ends with her by herself. And sort of the conceit, the POV of the story is that it's all through her eyes. And maybe I need to take another pass at that, but I'm worried that by getting too into her inner secret thoughts in the POV flashback, that if I pull back and reveal that it is, it's all an unreliable narrator, that it'll bump the audience. It'll feel like I wasn't playing fair, or it'll feel like I've jumped tracks. I can show you that she's working with the tatterdemalion in the flashback by keeping things at an arm's length, like it's kind of third person. It's just sort of a narrative perspective. It's how close are we? Are third person close, or sort of third person distant?
If it was like 100% the story she's telling the cops, you wouldn't even see the part where she accepts the flower and everything. But I think you handled that well, because you see what happened and then you jump out and hear her version of what happened.
Right.
But yeah, I like the idea of someone controlling the Jason.
That was kind of the only thing I could think of that was interesting to me about this current resurgence of slasher story fascination. You know, there's a lot going on about final girls now. There's like 5 books out right now. They're all about final girls and slashers and things like that. Growing up as a horror fan in the 80s, we would try to think of our own slashers. You know, it's so hard, especially after the 90s. Like, every possible mask, weapon combo you could think of has been done. And if you stray too far away from it, it just kind of gets silly. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all, or it becomes just too generic.
So designing a slasher was a real challenge, and I've been on this scarecrow kick, and just playing with all these different sort of timelines and variations, because I think I want to tell more stories about the tatterdemalion.
Yeah, do so. It was a nice touch. It's a good imagery.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for hashing it out with me.